Okay, so how we're going to send our PCB off to the manufacturers. When we designed our PCB, you had a look at this design toolbox that represents every layer that's built up for your PCB. You have your top layer, your bottom layer, your key pouch. Each one of these layers actually equates to a separate file. And what happens is we have to break this board down now into each and every one of those separate files. And we then send those separate files to the manufacturer. The reason is because we could use one of 100 different design suites to design our PCB, and the manufacturer doesn't have any of them. They just want to see a common standard way of you presenting the files that they can then insert into their machines and manufacture your board. So each one of these layers will be broken down into a separate file, and this is called a Gerber file or Gerber file. What do you like to say, John? Gerber or Gerber?
I prefer gerbils.
Okay,
myself.
let's go with a Gerber file. So we'll go to a Gerber file. And that's standard then. It becomes a standard, so you could send it off to any fab house and they'd all understand the content of what you're wanting. So to do this, we use the export option in Ultiboard.
Hang on, mate, I'll just move the camera around so it gets on the big screen. It gets a bit better. We've seen enough of your handsome face, I think. I can hear some chirp, but I couldn't hear what it was. Okay, Mike, go for gold.
Right, so we're going to export this PCB into this relevant Gerber files. It's very simple. We go to export, file, export, and then up here we have our export dialog. You really don't want to be messing with these settings. The options that are selected by default really do cover pretty much every eventuality. Fab plants like to work in Imperial. It's always been a way, I don't know why, but PCBs use Imperial and schematics use millimeters and metrics. So we'll leave this scheme up here, which basically collects a load of settings for us in Fabrication Imperial. And what it's done is made some sort of selections here. There's two that are really important. We're going to use Gerber's at RS274, and we need the NC drill file. Now what that is when these boards are manufactured, everything will be manufactured, but there will be no holes in it. And then it will come out the board etching machines, and it will be passed to a drill shop. And the drill shop is a completely separate process, but we use CNC drills to drill the holes. So if we forget to include the NC drill file, our drill will come back fully etched, looking lovely, but no holes. Did it happen a lot of times, and it's really hard to drill the holes on stack, yeah? So we have to make sure that we're including the NC drill file. In fact, quite often, at that plant, when you send your boards for quotes or manufacturers, they'll come back to you and say, we can't do this in that drill file, if you're lucky. The others will just run it, charge you, and say it's not ample. This bit here is the layers that we want to include in our Gerber file. As you can see, we have to include the copper layers because they need to know where to etch the copper. And we want to include the board outline. The board outline is also important because that's how they know how to cut it. If you don't include the board outline, you might end up with a really big board. So that's an important one.
Paying for that, really.
And paying for it, absolutely. Your silk screen top and bottom, that's for the print shop. It's a separate file again because once it's all etched and everything, it will go to a ink printer or what do they call those things that squirt the ink on? Yes, it's an inkjet. It's like an inkjet. It squirt the ident. All these graphics will be squirted on as a separate file. The solder mask top and bottom, again, all separate files. Now you may also, if you wanted to have this placed, you would also include things like your paste masks, your top and bottom, so that they would know where to put the solder paste on to solder your components. But we don't need that in this case. So once we've just verified everything, like I said, you don't actually need to change anything. We just hit export. It will go through the process, and then it can say down here, look, that everyth's been exported. Yeah? You should see down here that everything's fine. And And if you click on any one of those, it will load the folder where it's exported all those files to. As you can see, it's called every file the same name as I've called the PCB, and then it will add on to there what part of the board that file relates to. Yeah? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete everything from here, and I'm going to run it again so that you can see. Okay. Empty folder. So we're going to go File, Export, and here's Hit Export. We're going to make sure that we haven't any errors down here. And look, we have a separate file for every layer that is ticked in that export. What we have to do now is zip all these together, send to a compressed folder, and then call it our name. And this zip file is what I'll send to the manufacturer. Now, just to give you an idea of how that would work, what I would do is I would roughly know the dimensions of this board. Normally there's some kind of, we can put some dimensions on this board. If we go on to a, let's have it on the 6 on the top, for example. Okay, so I'm going to place some dimensions just because I want to understand how big this board is. Yeah? So I have a standard dimension and I'm going to look from here to here. So we're looking at, and then on the other level here. Yeah, okay. And now, just because, okay, and now what we're going to do is we're going to click on that. Now, under here, there is somewhere, display unit, I believe it is. Yes, so I'm going to change that to millimeters rather than mil, because mil is thousands of an inch. Change that to millimeters. Okay, so this board is about 24 by 35 millimeters. Yeah? So let's have a look. Let's go to PCB way. This is just one of many design fab houses that will give you a nice quick quote. So what we read 24 by 35. Yeah? So I want to get a quote, my length 24, my width 35, and I say I want to make 5 boards. It's a 2-layer board, and my standard thickness of board is 1.6 millimeters. If I hit quote on this, it's going to ask me for a load more information. It's not too bad. I've got one design in my panel. I've got my 2 layers. Everything is good there. FR4 is just standard circuit board fiberglass. Everything else can be left how it is. You can change the colours if you want to, but just for the purpose of this, it's saying that in 24 hours I can get 5 for a total cost of $5. That's $1 a board. That's pretty cheap. For a prototype, that's pretty cheap. So if I was interested in that, and I think yes, actually I would save that to a card. Yeah, and it's going to ask to log in, which is a real shame. Maybe we can set up a new user. Let's set up a new user. Pushing email. Yeah, email address.
What, are you going to create it?
Yeah, I want to get that Gerber file up there to show you. Let's think of. Because it will check that Gerber file, see?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Right, so I've added that to my cart, and now it's saying, well, where should go? Gerber. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag that Gerber file up there. It's going to upload it, and I'm going to submit this order. Well, what this is actually going to do is it's not going to make me pay for it. it's going to go through a verification process. And this verification process is quite often automated, so it should quite quickly come back to say, at the moment it's under review. And if we just leave that a little bit, in a few minutes' time, that will probably come up. It's either going to tell me that it's found problems, it's going to go through an automated process now, it's going to tell me if it's found problems from my board that I need to address before they can manufacture it, or that it's ready for payment. But it's an important part of the process, because this is the point where it says, like, you presented your files to manufacture, but we can't physically produce this because. Yeah, and they will give you a design error document back. Yeah. Normally they're quite good. And what happens when they give you the design document back is you get what's called a Gerber viewer. And you can use that viewer to highlight to you the problems of your board. So let's make your board is all good.
It's Sean's.
So it's actually already analysed my board and it now knows the actual dimensions 34 by 6 by 23.9. And now look, order statement is changed to pass statement. Okay? So if we now refresh this, now we've got one in and waiting for payment. Yeah? Okay? And now what I can do is I can view my